Chapter 8. The golden light of the setting sun stretched across Eden, spilling honey-colored rays over the rivers and setting the treetops ablaze with warm hues. The air was thick with the scent of blossoms, sweet fruit, and the crisp freshness of leaves sighing in the twilight breeze. Adam and Eve walked side by side, their bare feet sinking into the velvety grass, their fingers loosely entwined. The day had been filled with wonder, discovery, laughter, and firsts. But now, as the sky deepened into soft violet and the stars began to peek from their heavenly canopy, something else filled the air. Something new. It was just the two of them. As Adam stood atop the gentle rise of a hill, his gaze stretched across the vastness of Eden, bathed in the gold-drenched light of the setting sun. The garden, planted eastward, near the mighty river Euphrates, was a masterpiece of divine intention, a world untouched by sorrow, unmarred by decay. This was his domain, not to subjugate, not to own, but to tend, to steward, to bring forth life. Adam exhaled, running a thoughtful hand through his thick hair as he looked out over the land. This was the home he was to cultivate, the place where he and Eve would dwell. But home was more than soil and trees. It was her. His eyes softened as he turned toward his wife, where she knelt amid a cluster of soft, tumbling creatures, their golden fur kissed by the last embers of daylight. They climbed over her hands, their tails wagging in pure, unburdened delight as she giggled, nudging one onto its feet. Above her, butterflies flickered like living jewels, caught in the whispering breeze. Adam felt something deep and immeasurable settle within him, a longing for the unseen, for the ones that would come after them, their children. Would they have her brightness, her laughter, his strength, his voice? He could not yet fathom it. And yet, something within him stirred. This was their beginning. Be fruitful and multiply, God had said. Not just a command, a promise. Generations would come from them. Generations who would look upon Eden with the same wonder in their eyes, who would learn to till the ground, to name the creatures, to grow, to build, to sing. Their sons, their daughters, living reflections of this love, of this holy union, of the God who had made them. It was a thought too great, too profound, and yet it fascinated him. Would he be a good father? Would he be wise enough, strong enough? He had been made in God's image, given dominion over the earth. But could he guide the hearts of the children who would one day fill this land? The thought was weighty, humbling, but he would not bear it alone. Eve would stand beside him, and above them both, God. He was to be the image bearer, not just in form but in function. He was placed as God's representative, to reflect the divine, to walk in authority, to care for the lower creatures who could not know their Creator, but could know Him. To rule, but never as a tyrant. To reign, but only as a servant of the Most High. His chest swelled with quiet reverence. And yet, a shadowed thought stirred at the edges of his mind. A brief warning. A name spoken, not in fear, but in solemnity. Lucifer. A being of breathtaking beauty, once a morning star, a prince among the heavenly host, a name now whispered with sorrow, with finality. A third of the angels had followed him into exile. How? Adam furrowed his brow. A war in heaven. He had been told little, only that in the morning, after worship, God would tell them more. There would be time to understand. And yet, his gaze returned to Eve, her delicate fingers scratching the ears of the smallest pup as she whispered to it, her smile radiant with joy. The world was too pure for sorrow, too full for loss, too perfect for rebellion. What place could sorrow ever find in a world where joy was woven into its very breath? And yet, the words of God lingered. A breeze stirred the trees, carrying the scent of the evening blooms, wrapping around them like a whisper. Adam inhaled deeply. No, not tonight. Tonight was theirs. Tonight was the Sabbath. A night to belong. A night to wonder. A night to rest in the goodness of the one who had made them. He took a step forward and, without warning, snatched Eve's hand in his, grinning mischievously. Her startled laugh rang through the air. "Adam!" Adam glanced at Eve, a boyish grin tugging at the corners of his lips. He had named every creature, tasted nearly every fruit, run his hands through the cool waters of the rivers, felt the wind rush past his face as he raced alongside the gazelles. But nothing had prepared him for her. She was more fascinating than any mystery in Eden. Eve caught his look and arched a perfect brow. "What?" Adam rubbed the back of his neck. "Nothing. Just thinking." Eve smirked, tilting her head. "What were you thinking about?" Adam opened his mouth, then hesitated. What was he thinking about? That she was breathtaking, that she smelled like sunshine and flowers, that every time she spoke it felt like a melody wrapped around him, that he was ridiculously nervous for no reason at all. Instead, he settled on the trees. So many trees. Eve blinked. Then she laughed. A bright, musical laugh that sent a delightful shiver down Adam's spine. She reached out, poking his arm playfully. "You've seen trees all day, and now you're thinking about trees?" Eve folded her arms too, mirroring him with a teasing smirk. "Oh? And which one is your favorite?" Adam opened his mouth, then shut it. His favorite tree? Was he supposed to have a favorite tree? Eve giggled at his expression, stepping closer. "I think you're just flustered." Adam scoffed. "Flustered? Me?" He gestured to himself. "I named an entire world today. I'm the first man. I'm the—" "Flustered," Eve interrupted, grinning. Adam opened his mouth, then closed it again. Eve just smiled knowingly. She had won. Adam sighed dramatically, throwing his hands in the air. "Fine. Perhaps just a little." Eve laughed, stepping past him toward a vine heavy with fruit. "Here." She plucked a golden, glistening fruit, turning it in her hands before offering it to Adam. A peace offering. Adam took it, raising a brow. "For what?" "For making you flustered." She smiled, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Adam scoffed, taking a bite. The juices burst across his tongue, sweet and cool. He chewed thoughtfully, then cast her a knowing glance. "You enjoy winning, don't you?" Eve bit into her own fruit, her gaze steady and playful. "I enjoy learning you." Adam paused, her words settling over him like the warmth of the setting sun. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I enjoy knowing that I always will." Adam shook his head, but his grin was undeniable. She was something else. They wandered through the garden, their conversation playful, filled with teasing and laughter. They talked about their favorite sights, the funniest creatures, the fruit that tasted the best, the strangest sounds they'd heard. At one point, Adam stopped and turned to her. "So, what do you want to learn first?" Eve's gaze lifted toward the endless sky. She was silent for a moment, then looked at him. "Everything." Adam chuckled. "Ambitious." "Well," she said with a thoughtful smile, "I have eternity to learn, don't I?" Adam tilted his head, considering her words. Eternity. They were at the very beginning of forever. And for the first time since the sun had risen that morning, Adam truly felt it. This was only the start. As they walked, they found themselves near the center of the garden. The tree of life stood tall and majestic, its leaves shimmering like polished emeralds, its fruit glowing as though kissed by divine fire, a promise of eternity. But nearby another tree stood, not twisted or dark, not gnarled or foreboding, It was beautiful. Its branches stretched high, its fruit plump, rich, enticing. The scent of it was unlike anything else in Eden. It smelled curious. Adam exhaled. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eve stepped closer, stopping just short of its branches. It doesn't seem dangerous. It isn't, Adam said slowly. Not the tree itself, but the choice it represents. Eve turned to him. The choice? Adam nodded. He told me, love is only love if it's chosen. Eve was silent, watching him. Adam continued. We were given everything, a home, life, each other, and this tree. He exhaled. It's a reminder that we are free to trust him, or not. A breeze stirred through the branches, whispering through the leaves. Freedom. Adam had understood it the moment God had spoken to him. They had been created in love, but love was not true unless it was given freely. Without a choice, they would be nothing more than beautifully crafted statues, reflections of the Almighty without the heart to return his love. Eve nodded slowly. I trust him. Adam met her gaze and smiled. So do I. And just like that, the weight of the moment lifted, and the playfulness returned. Eve turned on her heel. Now, tell me your actual favorite tree, because I don't believe for a second that it's just all the trees. Adam groaned, laughing. Oh, so we're back to that? Eve grinned, mischief in her eyes. As the golden sun dipped beneath the horizon, its final light melting into deep indigo, a hush fell over Eden. The world exhaled in quiet reverence, as if creation itself understood. The Sabbath had begun. The warmth of the day gave way to the cool embrace of twilight, and the first stars blinked awake, scattered like diamonds across the endless sky. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of blossoms and ripe fruit, wrapping the garden in a breath of peace. But for Adam and Eve, sleep was the last thing on their minds. Excitement bubbled within them, for each other, for their new home, for the morning to come. They could barely contain it. With a playful grin, Adam nudged Eve's side before sprinting ahead, daring her to catch him. With a burst of laughter, she chased after him, her golden hair catching the moonlight as they raced through the meadows. Their laughter rang out like music, echoing through the valley, filling the night with joy. The creatures of Eden stirred, watching curiously, the first man and the first woman alive with delight. Breathless, they tumbled onto the soft grass, side by side, staring up at the endless expanse above. The heavens stretched out before them, infinite, wondrous. The stars shimmered, reflecting in their eyes like tiny, distant fires. Eve turned her head toward Adam, a soft smile playing on her lips. It's beautiful, she whispered. Adam nodded, his gaze still fixed on the sky. Tomorrow, he murmured, we meet him. A quiet thrill passed between them. The one who had breathed life into them, who had joined them as one, who had placed the entire world in their hands. He was coming. And yet, tonight was theirs. A night of laughter, of newness, of belonging. They talked until their voices grew soft and sleepy, their hands still intertwined. And as the first Sabbath stretched its arms across creation, the two drifted into peaceful rest. Together, in the heart of Eden, beneath the watching stars. Then, the first light of the Sabbath stretched across Eden, bathing the world in a golden glow that shimmered upon the rivers and danced upon the emerald hills. The fragrance of blossoms, soft and sweet, mingled with the crisp morning air, wrapping the garden in a breath of peace. Adam stirred, feeling the warmth of the rising sun against his skin. Eve lay beside him, her golden hair spread across the soft grass, her breathing slow and steady. He turned toward her, drinking in the moment. They had talked late into the night, whispered dreams of their life together, and marveled at the heavens until sleep had finally claimed them. But now, the morning had come, and he was here. The Son of God stood before them, clothed in light, his face radiant with joy. And behind him stood 4 magnificent figures: Gabriel, Raphael, Cassiel, and Selaphiel, their celestial forms shimmering in the dawn. Adam and Eve sat up, hearts quickening with anticipation. "Rise," the Son of God said, his voice filled with warmth. Adam reached for Eve's hand, and together they rose, standing before their Creator. Gabriel stepped forward, his robe glistening with woven threads of gold. He stretched out his hand toward the horizon. "Let us find a place," he said, his voice steady and full of strength. "A place worthy of this day, a place where we may worship." And so they followed. They walked past rivers that gleamed like liquid sapphire, through meadows alive with color, beneath trees heavy with fruit that glowed as if kissed by divine fire. The creatures of Eden stirred, bowing their heads as the first man and woman passed, as if all of creation understood the holiness of this morning. At last, they came to a place unlike any other, a high place, where the trees opened to reveal a breathtaking view of the entire garden. The river wound below them like a ribbon of silver. The mountains stood in the distance like silent watchers, and the sky, oh, the sky, was an endless expanse of radiant blue, with golden light cascading down like a benediction. Here, they would worship. Adam exhaled in awe. Eve clasped his hand tighter. The Son of God turned to them, his gaze full of delight. "Let us sing." Gabriel, the angel of music, stepped forward, his voice like the rushing of water, like the song of the wind through the trees. "Sing with us, children of the Most High. Let your voices rise, for this is the day of his rest, his delight, his joy." And so he sang, a melody unlike anything heard before, a song woven into the very fabric of creation, a song of life, love, and eternal delight. Selaphiel joined, his voice strong, like the sound of a horn rolling in the distance. Raphael's voice was warm and rich, the harmony of the rivers. Cassiel's was like the whisper of leaves, soft yet full of meaning. Then Adam and Eve opened their mouths, and song poured forth. Their voices, new yet ancient, lifted with the angels. They sang of the glory of the Almighty, of the rivers that carried his whispers, of the fruit-laden trees that bore witness to his goodness. They sang of the breath that had filled their lungs, of the beauty of life, of the endless love that surrounded them. Eve's voice was light as morning mist, dancing like sunlight upon water. Adam's was strong and steady, deep as the roots of the earth. And heaven listened. Even the creatures of Eden joined, the birds in trilling harmony, the wind in a soft chorus through the branches, the rivers in their flowing rhythm. And the Son of God stood among them, listening, delighting. For this was why he had made them. When the last note faded, a holy stillness settled over them. The morning air was thick with awe, with gratitude, with the presence of the divine. Then Cassiel, the angel of wisdom, stepped forward. His voice was like the deep rumble of the earth, steady, measured, filled with reverence. He lifted his hands, his gaze sweeping over the garden as if drinking in every detail. Nature testifies of God's love. Adam and Eve stilled. Cassiel continued, his words unfolding like poetry, like prophecy. Our Father in heaven is the source of life, of wisdom, and of joy. Look at the wonderful and beautiful things of nature. Think of their marvelous adaptation to the needs and happiness, not only of man, but of all living creatures. The sunshine and the rain that gladden and refresh the earth, the hills and seas and plains, all speak to us of the Creator's love. It is God who supplies the daily needs of all his creatures. His voice deepened, his words carrying the weight of eternity. Adam felt something stir deep within his soul, a knowing, a recognition of the boundless love that surrounded them. Cassiel's gaze softened. God made you holy and happy, and the fair earth, as it came from the Creator's hand, bore no blight, no decay, no sorrow, no shadow of the curse. All is love, all is joy. Eve's eyes shone with wonder. But Cassiel's voice grew solemn, rich with wisdom, as he turned toward Adam, toward Eve. Look at the trees that stretch toward the heavens. Look at the rivers that flow without ceasing. Look at the blossoms that open to the light. All of nature longs for its creator. His voice softened, full of unshakable certainty. So should you. Silence settled, and Adam understood. Every tree, every blade of grass, every bird in song, it all pointed back to him. The one who had made them, the one who had breathed into them, the one who had called them his own. Eve exhaled, pressing a hand to her chest. Adam reached for her hand. The Son of God watched them, his joy evident. And in that moment, the Sabbath truly began. Cassiel lifts his hands toward the sky. Let the hills declare his greatness. Let the rivers sing of his mercy. Let every living thing proclaim God is love. A hush falls. Gabriel stepped forward, his expression warm. Now, he said, voice steady, come, let us show you the wonders of your home. Adam and Eve glanced at each other, excitement flickering in their eyes. The Son of God smiled. Go with them, learn, delight. For all of this is my gift to you. I will follow shortly. And with that, he turned, walking toward the tree of life, where the very breath of eternity stirred its branches. Adam exhaled. Then he turned to Eve, his lips curling into a slow smile. Shall we? Eve laughed softly, slipping her hand into his, and together, for the first time, they walked with the angels. Heaven had come to meet them, and the world had only just begun. The Son of God stood alone in Eden. The laughter of Adam and Eve, the voices of the angels, the murmuring of the rivers, all faded into the distance as they walked with Gabriel. But he remained, because he knew. The shadows beyond the garden stirred. The air thickened, charged with unseen weight. He was here. Michael did not turn immediately. Instead, he spoke, his voice calm, knowing, waiting. Come out, Lucifer. Silence. Then, a shift. A figure stepped from the edge of the unseen. Lucifer, once the bearer of light, now a king without a kingdom. He moved as he once had in heaven, graceful, commanding, breathtaking. Yet there was something fractured about him now, something unseen yet deeply felt. His gaze swept across Eden, the golden trees, the rivers of glass, the fruit glowing like embers kissed by divine fire. And there, Adam and Eve, laughing, innocent, untouched by rebellion. His jaw clenched. He had been right. The Almighty had replaced him. Lucifer's voice was smooth, deliberate. You knew I was here. Michael turned at last, his expression unreadable. I always know where you are. Lucifer exhaled a quiet, humorless laugh. Of course you do. His gaze lingered on the garden. Your handiwork is impressive. Michael's voice was gentle yet piercing. Have you truly seen it? Not just looked, but seen. Lucifer's lips pressed together. Had he? His eyes flickered toward the sky, the golden light, the untainted beauty, the sheer perfection of it all. For a fleeting moment, something stirred in him. And then, just as quickly, he crushed it. His expression darkened. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "But beauty is fleeting. Nothing lasts." The words hung between them. The sun studied him, sorrow flickering behind his eternal gaze. "That is not true." Lucifer's jaw tightened. "Isn't it?" His voice was quiet but sharp. "I was once called Morning Star. I once stood beside you, and yet here I am, stripped of my place, stripped of my name." He took a slow step forward, voice dropping. "Tell me, Michael, if even I could fall, what hope do they have?" His gaze flicked toward Adam and Eve. The sun did not answer immediately. He simply looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, but with grief. Lucifer scoffed, shaking his head. "I miss it." His voice was softer now, raw in a way he did not intend. "I miss the songs, the light, the courts of heaven. I miss—" His voice faltered, then quieter. "I miss the family." Michael felt it. That flicker, the aching longing, the shadow of what once was. But he also knew it was too late. Probation had closed in heaven. There had been time. Before the war. Before the choice was sealed. But now it was finished. Lucifer lifted his chin, grasping for the last of his pride. "I want to return." Michael said nothing. Lucifer's gaze burned into him. "Did you hear me, Michael? I want to come back." Michael's voice was steady. "Do you?" Lucifer hesitated, just for a moment. Then, "Yes." His answer came too quickly. "Yes, I do. I see now. My error. I was—" He inhaled sharply, forcing the words out. "I was misled." The sun's expression did not change. "By whom?" Lucifer's fingers curled at his sides. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence stretched. And in that silence, the truth laid itself bare. Lucifer was not here to repent. He was here to bargain. Michael sighed, a sound so deep, so sorrowful, that it made Lucifer's entire being tense. "Sorrow for consequence is not sorrow for sin," Michael said at last. "You grieve what you lost, not what you have done." Lucifer's breath hitched. The sun stepped forward, his voice quiet but absolute. "You desire the kingdom, but not the king. You long for your place, but not for my heart." Lucifer's eyes flashed. "You don't know that." "Don't I?" A heavy pause. Lucifer looked away. His wings twitched, his fists clenched. His gaze flickered toward heaven, toward Gabriel. His lip curled, bitterness creeping in. "Gabriel takes my place, I assume." The sun's expression did not change. Lucifer scoffed, shaking his head. "Tell me, does he lead as I did? Does he inspire? Does he create? Does he—" He exhaled sharply. "Does he sing like I did?" A quiet moment passed. Michael's voice was soft. "He sings for me." Something inside Lucifer snapped. His eyes flared, not with sorrow, but with fury. "I sang for you." His voice shook, and yet, you chose silence. You let the whispers grow. You let doubt take root. You let us believe there was more. The sun held his gaze, unwavering. Lucifer took a step forward. "How much could have been prevented if you had only spoken?" His voice was rising. "If you had only told us the plan, if you had given me clarity?" Michael did not answer. Lucifer's breathing was sharp now. "You call me deceiver," he said bitterly. "But who was it that kept truth hidden?" Silence, then softly. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Lucifer's eyes darkened. "It is what I know." The sun shook his head, grief shadowing his features. "No, Lucifer. It is what you have chosen to believe." Lucifer's expression twisted. For one moment, one flickering second, it looked as if he might say something else. Something real, something honest. And Michael waited. But then, Lucifer straightened. And just like that, it was gone. He exhaled sharply, stepping back. Coldness returned to his eyes. It doesn't matter. His voice was clipped now, detached. I made my choice, and so have you. The sun's gaze softened, full of infinite sorrow. Yes. Lucifer studied him, took him in. Then, without another word, Lucifer turned. He stepped back into the shadows, and was gone. The last golden embers of the Sabbath sun dipped below the horizon, washing Eden in hues of soft violet and deep indigo. A gentle hush settled over the garden, as if all creation exhaled in reverence for the closing of the first holy day. Fireflies flickered in the twilight. The rivers whispered their endless song, and the fragrance of blossoms hung sweet and heavy in the air. Adam and Eve sat beneath a canopy of trees, their fingers entwined, their faces aglow in the fading light. Before them, the Son of God sat with them, not as a distant deity, but as a friend, a brother. The table before them, crafted by no hands but the mind of God himself, was laden with the richest fruits Eden had to offer. Clusters of golden grapes glistened in the light of the setting sun. Pomegranates, bursting with ruby seeds, lay beside figs ripened to perfection. There were fruits neither Adam nor Eve had yet named, their flavors waiting to be discovered. The son picked up a bright crimson fruit and turned it in his hand, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. You have yet to name this one, he mused, looking at Adam with warm expectation. Adam chuckled, glancing at Eve. It's difficult, he admitted. There are so many, each more wonderful than the last. Eve took one and studied it, then bit into the tender flesh. Her eyes widened at the burst of sweetness. She tilted her head in thought. It tastes like sunlight. The son laughed, the sound like music in the cool evening air. Then perhaps it shall be called the sunfruit. Adam grinned. Sunfruit? He turned the name over in his mouth, then nodded. Yes, I like that. They ate together in peace, the first Sabbath meal shared not just with each other, but with their Creator. The Son of God watched them, delight shining in his eyes. Tell me, he said after a moment, how was your visit with the four? Eve smiled instantly. Oh, they are wonderful. Adam nodded eagerly. Gabriel is strong. There is something steady about him, like the mountains. He carries himself with such certainty. The son chuckled. Yes, Gabriel is the mightiest among them, the defender of heaven. His heart is fierce in battle, but tender with those he protects. His gaze softened. He is most honored to serve you. Eve rested her chin in her hand. And Raphael? She sighed dreamily. He is gentle. I liked him very much. The son nodded. Raphael's heart is like the rivers, calm, healing. He is the guardian of peace. He delights in restoring all things to their fullness. He smiled knowingly. I imagine he had much to say about the beauty of Eden. Oh, he did, Adam said, laughing. He told us about every plant, every leaf, every breeze. He gestured animatedly. He even described the way the wind moves through the trees, like a great, unseen river. The Creator leaned in slightly. And what of Cassiel? Eve hesitated, glancing at Adam. He speaks like a man who has seen the ages. The son nodded. Cassiel is a scribe of heaven. He knows much, and what he does not yet know he seeks with all his heart. He is the keeper of wisdom, the watcher of time. His words carry the weight of eternity. Adam exhaled. He spoke of Lucifer. Yes, He would. A quiet moment passed between them. The weight of what had been lost and what had yet to come flickered in Adam's mind. But before it could settle, Eve's eyes brightened. And Selah, he is joy itself. She laughed, remembering. He dances like the stars, and his voice sounds like the very breath of the wind. The sun grinned. Ah, Selah, the angel of praise. No heart in heaven sings with more joy than his. He is the first to laugh, the first to dance, the first to lift his voice in worship. His delight is contagious. Oh, it is, Eve agreed. He made us dance too. The Son of God chuckled. Then he has done his work well. A comfortable silence settled over them as the last light of the sun melted into deep blue. The first stars blinked into existence, scattering across the heavens like jewels set into velvet. The cool air carried the scent of blossoms and ripened fruit, wrapping the garden in a breath of peace. Adam leaned back on his hands, gazing at the vast sky. It was a perfect Sabbath. Eve nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. Yes, perfect. The Creator smiled, watching them. It is good, he said softly, and it will only grow sweeter with time. He reached forward, tearing a small piece of fruit and offering it to them both. Let us close the Sabbath together. Adam and Eve took the fruit from his hand, eating in quiet reverence. The Son of God lifted his eyes toward heaven, and his voice, steady, rich, eternal, filled the space around them. Father, we thank you for this day of delight, for the breath of the trees, the song of the rivers, for the love that binds us together, for the joy of creation and the beauty of your presence. We close this day in peace, and we rest in your love, until we rise again to walk with you once more. Amen. Adam and Eve echoed him softly. Amen. The stars above seemed to shimmer in response, as if the very heavens were bowing to the closing of the Sabbath. The Creator looked at them both, his expression full of warmth. Tomorrow, we begin again. There is much work to do in your new home. Eve grinned. More trees to name? The son laughed. More than you could count. Adam smiled. Then we will be ready. The Son of God rose to his feet, and Adam and Eve followed. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. I will see you tomorrow. With one last gentle glance, he turned, walking toward the heart of Eden. Adam and Eve watched him go, their hearts full, peaceful, at rest. They had spent their first Sabbath with their Creator, and tomorrow they would walk with him again. The Son of God lingered for a moment, his gaze resting on them, so full of joy, so untouched by sorrow. Rest well, my children, for tonight there is only joy. His heart ached with a love deeper than the foundations of the world. He turned, stepping toward the unseen realm. Yet his spirit remained, whispering a silent prayer over Eden, over them. Keep them, Father. Let their hearts remain steadfast. Let their love for you hold. But as he departed, the wind carried a quiet foreboding, a weight only he could feel. For soon, they will have to choose.